The first round of fantasy football drafts right now is completely wrong. Today, we are going to break away from consensus, tell you how the first round of fantasy football draft should actually unfold based off of our projections in our 2025 draft guide. So to give the people a little bit of a roadmap of how this is going to work, we're going to start at the 101. Each one of us is going to take a pick. We'll work our way through the first round. And as a little bonus, we'll give you the first 3 picks of the second round as well, giving you a nice, solid top 15 based on our projection. So, Cameron, I'll actually have you take the 101. Ty, you can have the 102. I'll follow up 103. You're breaking away from consensus immediately, Cameron, at 101. Who's your pick?
Yeah, it's Bijan Robinson. And I get loving Jamar Chase. Not a lot changed about his situation. They're still going to throw the ball. I understand all that. But what Bijan was able to do last year, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see on the screen, over 1,400 yards, 14 touchdowns, another 60 receptions and 430 yards. It feels like, if anything, this offense is going to take a step forward coming into this year with Michael Penix, right? I mean, if you remember last year, just take a trip down memory lane. People could not stand watching Kirk Cousins. I think the dude moved around in the pocket for a total of 13 yards the entire season, not scrambled for, just moved in the pocket a total of 13 yards. I mean, he could barely even stand. And now they have Michael Penix, which should be an upgrade, but at the same time, you're going to want to protect him, continue to give Bijan touches. And yeah, that's really what this projection comes down to. I see him getting another 300 carries. I see him getting another 60 rush attempts. And with that amount of volume, seeing 12, 14, 15 touchdowns is not out of the realm of possibilities for Bijan. I'm trusting the talent, trusting the situation, and just youth overall with this pick.
Yeah, as much as you want to get the ball in Michael Penix's hands this year, the best way to relieve pressure off of him is to feed your literal bell cow running back that you took very early in the first round of the 2023 NFL draft. Ty, you have any gripes here? I mean, Bijan's my number 1 player as well in terms of projected fantasy points. You have any gripes with this?
I really don't. I guess, like, I understand if people are going to get upset because it's not Jamar Chase, and Jamar Chase is pretty much consensus 101 this year
across the board right now.
Right. So I understand if people will get upset, but I also hear the side of the Bijan or the Bijan argument of youth and situation when it comes to Atlanta, where this offense is still relatively unchanged despite the quarterback change, and the offense will go through Bijan. It did last year. It will again this year. So I don't have too many gripes about it, but I know where I would lean with my 101.
Yeah, now before we tear into the rest of the draft here, we know you're already prepping for the first round and beyond of your fantasy drafts this year. This is the place you're going to want to be this offseason, so make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell as well, so you know when all of our newest content is up. We don't only make content just to give you our fantasy football insights, we also make content because we want to beat each other in our leagues just as bad as you want to beat your friends in your fantasy football leagues as well. So hopefully, along with the insights we can provide, we can have some fun along the way, make some memories as well. So Ty, I'll kick it back to you here. 102, who's your pick?
It's Jamar Chase. You know, most people's 101, and I think for a very good reason. I think when it comes to Jamar Chase, he may not be the, you can see on my projection, it is substantially lower than what Cam's projection is for Bijan. But the reason why I think Jamar Chase should still be the 102 and still going ahead of some other big name running backs is because on a week-to-week basis, Jamar Chase has the highest upside of any player in fantasy football. And what we saw last year, I think, I don't want to say was the culmination of it, but we saw so much of it that I completely understand the reason why, again, people want that at the 101. So Jamar is not my highest projected player on the board right now. I have a couple other players that are running backs ahead. But again, I think there's a positional advantage in some sense of getting the week-to-week upside that Jamar Chase gives you compared to the other receivers.
175 targets, 127 receptions, 1,700 yards, 17 touchdowns. I mean, is it crazy to say, like, Jamar Chase could easily do that again this year? Like, totally. It's just kind of laughable, like, how, like, we might almost expect that to be the norm. Like, if Jamar Chase, goes for 150 targets, 110 receptions, and 1,400 yards, and 13 touchdowns, we're going to think that's a disappointing. Some people are going to think it's a disappointing year, when in reality, that could still end up being the wide receiver one this year. Cameron, is he your 102 as well?
Yes, he would be my 102. It's like I said, nothing's changed in this offense that would make you doubt. For me, it's a little bit of history. We haven't seen a repeat wide receiver one overall since Antonio Brown in 2014, 2015. So, seeing that again, but it is like Ty said, if you take Jamar Chase over Bijan, it's like I can't argue with 127, 17, 08, and 17 because a bad season is going to be 115, 112, right? So like he's going to be a top 5 wide receiver no matter what, as long as him and Burrow are healthy. So yeah, it's really hard to argue that one for sure.
I'll keep it moving here. I'll move on to the 103. Not much debate we need to have here. But the 103 gets interesting. You can go a multitude of different directions here. I'm going Justin Jefferson. And I honestly, it's not that I prefer Jefferson to a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon Barkley to any extent. When I look at the draft board from the 103 and what comes back to me in the second round, the running backs in that range just project way higher for me than the second round wide receivers do that would come back in the latter part of the second round. So am I willing to take a little bit of a lower projection at the wide receiver position rather than Jahmyr Gibbs, who projects about 20 points higher than Jefferson, to instead get a running back that projects about 30 points higher than the wide receivers available? Yeah, I absolutely would. So this is a little bit of draft game theory here. I don't need to tell you how good of a player Justin Jefferson is, but what do you two think about that approach? Because I was torn between Justin Jefferson and Jahmyr Gibbs. But when I looked at the rest of my projections, again, when I'm looking at like a Ladd McConkey or Rashee Rice, who would come back to me in the second round, I mean, it just doesn't compare to guys, like a Jonathan Taylor, who I have, sitting at like 246 points this year compared to like a Ladd McConkey who's at like 213. I mean, it balances itself out at the end of the day.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Jefferson, admittedly, is in my 105, 106 conversation for me. He is my wide receiver 3. I have CeeDee Lamb higher. I just think him and Chase give you a higher upside just because I'm factoring in 100%. I don't want to spoil it, but just factoring in from Jefferson's side, JJ McCarthy is. I don't think
totally
McCarthy can get Jefferson to 1,700 yards. I don't think he can get him to 13, 14 touchdowns, where I think the other two have that upside. So that's really what it comes down to for me is, like you said, he might be the safest pick because we've seen it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. It doesn't matter who he plays. It doesn't matter who else is on the field. He gets his. He's amazing when he's out there. So can't argue with it at all. I just would still take an upside bet with a couple other players.
Where do you land on that, Ty?
I don't mind it. I think when you're at the 103 and probably to the 105, I don't really think there's a direction that you can go that's incorrect or that's wrong. I mean,
no, I agree.
Right, exactly. Like Saquon Barkley's left on the board. You can definitely go Saquon 103. Cam talked about CeeDee Lamb. You can definitely go CeeDee Lamb 103. Like there is not really a wrong pick here. And it is maybe just what you prefer. It's a flavor pick. I think we all understand this to also be kind of a vote of confidence of Kevin O'Connell, that Kevin O'Connell can, keep JJ McCarthy in the right spot to sustain and to help Justin Jefferson then become a top 3 wide receiver in fantasy then as well.
Well, let's keep it moving. We've named a lot of other guys that you could take in this range. So let's see how the board unfolds for us. Then Cameron, it's back to you at the 104. Who's the pick?
It's Jahmyr Gibbs here for me. And I know if you're looking on YouTube, you go, oh, running back 3. Where's Cameron's running back 2? We've only talked about one running back so far. We'll get to it later. But Jahmyr Gibbs, we've talked about our concerns with Ben Johnson. And admittedly, obviously, I've talked about him a lot. I have them about him leaving. But for me, this is the bet that Jahmyr Gibbs at all times is the most talented player on the football field, at least on the offensive side of the ball. And that what we saw last year, no matter the scheme, no matter the split, he's going to be able to replicate in some way. Obviously, 20 touchdowns is going to be really hard to replicate. I understand that. I'm not expecting him to be the running back 1 overall. That's why I have him as my running back 3. But I still think he comes down from 20 to 12 to 15. It still puts him in this range. And I'm just going to continue to bet on the talent, even with the offensive line changes, even with the offensive coordinator changes. because we talk about the changes too. We're not projecting Detroit to be a bad offense all of a sudden.
No.
We're just saying they're not going to be the best of the best. They're not going to put up 7 more touchdowns than the Baltimore Ravens did, right? That's what we're saying, is that they're just not going to be at the peak this season. So, yeah, I love Gibbs. I love what he's done. I think he showed last year. It doesn't matter, how much Monty's playing. He's pretty game proof. He's matchup proof, script proof. He just does it all.
And I think if I'm worried about the Detroit Lions offense regressing this year, I'm not worried about it coming at the expense of a Jahmyr Gibbs or an Amon-Ra. Yeah. I'm worried about it coming at the expense of a Jameson Williams, who, golly, Ben Johnson did some phenomenal things with last year. I'm worried about it coming at the expense of a Sam Laporta, who, could still be in for a bounce back season, but can Sam Laporta actually enter into the range of the McBrides, the Kittles, the Bowers? I really don't think so. But Jahmyr Gibbs is your future. You lean on him when David Montgomery is your short yardage and goal line back in between the tackles, and you're missing parts of the interior of your offensive line. I know it impacts Gibbs to some extent, but he's the one piece here that I'm just not worried about with the Lions offense regressing. He's going to be the one constant that I think they actually probably want to make sure stays heavily involved, Ty.
Yeah, we talked about it on our recent mock draft live stream where I took Jameson Williams, and you expressed, and everyone's talking about this offense regressing, why are you still sinking capital into Jameson Williams? And I described it as, yes, this offense will regress, but with that, I believe comes consolidation, where it is going to be the Jahmyr Gibbs. It's going to be the Amon-Ra show. And I think the person that regresses the most out of Detroit is Sam Laporta. So still trying to justify the Jameson pick to you, because I could tell I did not sell you on it on the live stream. But again, I think Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown are going to be the two constants in this offense, no matter how much this offense regresses.
Jameson Williams may or may not be a player in a episode that's on the horizon here for us. I have yet to decide who my players will be for that show. That's a little bit of a sneak peek for you all. And based on my tone, you might be able to guess the theme of that episode. But
you talk about Jameson Williams, I'll talk about Roshan Johnson. 1 for 1, an eye for an eye.
Fair. That one's fair. I'm willing to hear you out on that one. Ty, I'll come right back to you here. 105. One big name that has not been drafted yet. I gotta imagine he comes off the board. Well, I gotta imagine he comes off the board here, but yes. This will be a fun conversational piece.
Yeah, Saquon Barkley, the current running back one on most platforms, Underdog and Sleeper. It's Saquon Barkley as the running back one, and we've talked pretty extensively so far this offseason about Saquon Barkley's ability to repeat what he did last year, and some of us have been very pessimistic, continue to be very pessimistic, and I'm willing to bet, not necessarily that we repeat what we saw last year, because the guy was first in explosive total yards. So yes, you could make the argument it was insanely efficient. You can make the argument that coming off of a year where you're getting 345 carries and nearly 30 receptions on top of it, you're going to see some regression. I understand all of that. But for me, I'm still betting on an elite talent with an elite offensive line and an elite offensive system. And yes, there will always be the risk to regress, that you don't get as many touches as you did the year before. But like I said, it's an elite talent. Maybe it is a bit of drafters' guilt for letting him slide to second rounds last year and not realizing it. But I think, again, I'm going to bet on elite talent. I'm going to bet on elite scheme and system, and that he will maybe not be as efficient to 338 points, but he can still be the running back one at the year's end.
So I think there's a lot of things that factor into this for me, and I'll name a few of them. And then, Cameron's like, I'm ready. Put me in, coach. I'm ready to tear into this one. For me, I think we all agree the Philadelphia Eagles are going to run the ball less this year, not because they want to, but they ran the ball at an absolutely stupid rate last year. I mean, we thought the Baltimore Ravens ran the ball a lot. The Philadelphia Eagles absolutely blew them out of the water. So I think we can expect regression there. It only comes at the cost of like 20 carries for Saquon Barkley for me. I still haven't sat it out for 325 carries. The biggest thing for me, well, nearly 5.5 yards per carry last year. That's a crazy number. And for me, it's the efficiency that I think comes crashing down. Not to like Saquon's only going to average 4.3 yards per carry this year, but I just don't like if he hits 5 yards per carry again. Like I'm just personally not expecting that. What are you expecting, Cameron?
Yeah, history is not kind to running backs who are over the age of 27, who are coming off of 300 plus carries going into the next season. The average dip, I think I pulled the stat earlier. I just couldn't find it where I put it. I think it's about 6 points per game is the average dip the next season. That's a lot, and that counts for Derrick Henry, who we'll talk about later, but as well. But it's just betting a little bit on history, betting on, like you said, Lucas. He was over 5.5. He was at 5.8 yards per carry last year.
Oh gosh, I undersold him.
Ridiculously high. I mean, like Derrick Henry, 5.9, Gibbs 5.6. So it's not all the realm of possibilities that it happens again. But if we're making a kind of a bet on what's going to happen again this year, I see it maybe a little bit of regression. They ran the ball 621 times last year. The next closest team was the Ravens at 554. They ran the ball 70 more times than the next closest team. That's the difference between them and the Ravens is the difference between the Ravens and the Bucs. And Bucs were 10th in rushing attempts. So even it coming back down to where second was in rushing attempts, we just see a dramatic fall off for Saquon Barkley. They have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert all healthy. They've lost guys on the defense. I'm not saying the defense is going to be bad. I think the defense is still going to be phenomenal. I still think they're going to be one of the top units in the NFL, but they were extremely dominant last year. They scored 29 rushing touchdowns. And honestly, it sounds crazy, but if I'm going to pick one of them to not have 12 plus rushing touchdowns this year, I'm saying Jalen Hurts is going to do it. I'm saying Saquon would be the one that probably loses in this scenario. Okay. And then you also lose out on Kellen Moore, who, we'll see how much of an impact that actually makes with the unit that you have. But for me, it's just all of those combined just have me a little more pessimistic on Saquon, at 28 years old, repeating or getting close to what we saw from him last year.
The final thing I'll add, and then I'll let you get your final rebuttal in here, Ty. Again, nearly 1,600 yards, 1,559 yards, and 11.5 touchdowns I have Saquon projected at this year, including gathering up 7 more receptions as well to put him at 40 receptions on the year. So, I think that the skills balance out a little bit, but it's not to a point where I think Saquon automatically returns RB1 numbers again for the second straight year. I do prefer Bijan, Gibbs, straight up to Saquon. But go, I'll let you chime in with your final rebuttal here, Ty, as the one who is pro Saquon Barkley RB1 still.
Well, so again, the rebuttals that Lucas and Cam gave are more so for my projections than they are for Saquon going at the 105 in your drafts, because we're not saying that Saquon should not be in the first round or be a top 5 pick in your draft.
Oh, gosh, no.
What we're saying is running back 1 getting 319 total fantasy points. Does that happen again? You guys think it's not so likely. I'm willing to take the chance that it does, but we're all still saying Saquon Barkley should be a top 5 pick. You're
saying he should be a top 8 pick.
Oh,
he should be a top 5.
No, that's what you are saying. You are saying that.
I just want to make sure we're not all saying that he's a top 5 pick, and that some of us might be saying he's a top 8 pick.
Go change your Twitter bio to Saquon Barkley hater, because again, I going outside the top 5 is very much a stretch. It was already a stretch going 5th, in my opinion.
Well, let's keep it moving. We got more names to cover. And Cameron says top 8. I know one of them because actually I know 2 of them. They'll actually be the next 2 names we talk about here. We already touched on CeeDee Lamb. He would be my next pick here, going at the 106. And similar to what you said, Cameron, I think CeeDee Lamb might actually have a higher ceiling than Justin Jefferson this year. I'm also worried he has a lower floor at the same time. So you can pick and choose the flavor you want there. If you'd rather have the safety of Jefferson, but maybe not the potential ceiling of CeeDee Lamb, who could have another wide receiver 1 overall season like we saw with a fully healthy Dak Prescott in 2023, where, again, if you're watching over on YouTube, great place to be. You can see his 2023 stats: 181 targets, 135 receptions, over 1,700 yards, 12 touchdowns. I'm expecting a big bounce back from this Dallas offense. I don't think this defense did anything to improve this offseason. I still think they're going to be in plenty of shootouts. Give me Dak, who has been a very consistent top 10 fantasy quarterback option when he's played in fully healthy seasons. And like, George Pickens is nice at all, but how much more does that actually potentially open up for CeeDee Lamb over the middle as well, if they actually got to pay attention to George Pickens on the outside? I love CeeDee Lamb this year. I do think his ceiling, I mean, it's obviously Lucas, his ceiling is the wide receiver 1 overall, but like, after Jamar Chase, like my second pick is probably CeeDee Lamb to get there. I also recognize this Dallas team could fall flat on his face. And that's why I still prefer Jefferson to Lamb. That's how it shook out in my projections as well. And that's how I decided to split the tie there. Is Jefferson is technically higher in my projections, even though I think CeeDee Lamb probably has the higher ceiling. And Campbell, I'll pivot back to you here because you said you preferred CeeDee Lamb to Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the stats on YouTube and you go, he had 212 points last year. Well, he played 15 games and Dak missed, I think, 9 games. No, maybe it was 7, but between 6 and 10 games last year. I could
number.
Someone will grab that for me. I was confident, and then I came out of my mouth.
And then you weren't.
Like, I don't believe this anymore. Let's see. Dak played 8 games, so he missed
8 games. Yeah.
Okay. So that you have to factor that in. You have to assume Dak's gonna be fully healthy this season. With that, yeah, I don't care who they brought in. Like George Pickens is great. I think George Pickens could have a career year in targets this season, and it's not going to affect the targets that go to CeeDee Lamb because this rush attack is not going to be good enough where they're just going to be able to pound the ball constantly. There's nobody else on the offense that is good enough to compete with CeeDee Lamb. And I think as long as Dak is fully healthy, I think his floor is what we saw in 2022, 1,350 yards, 8 or 9 touchdowns, 107 receptions, right? So I think that's the floor. And then I also think there's such a fantastic ceiling like we saw in 2023. I still think that exists even with George Pickens.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up. I was hoping one of you two would bring up that point about the investment in the running back position. Because what are they going to do? Feed Javonte Williams the ball 260 times this year? You're going to give it to Miles Sanders?
Yes.
Jaden Blue. I know some of you really like Jaden Blue as like a late round sleeper out there, but like, Jaden Blue ain't nothing special. My book puts the ball on the ground a lot.
The next time Pollard.
but like that's the point, right? If they're not gonna invest in the running back position to feed them the ball, okay, that communicates to me that with our paid quarterback and our paid star wide receiver, let's let him go to work, Ty. I mean that's kind of what it comes down to here for me.
I think the best way to say it is the common theme of all of our picks so far is that each guy is their team's offense, right? Bijan, Jamar, Jefferson, Gibbs, Saquon, and now CeeDee. Those guys are the guys that we are expecting to be the main producers on their offenses. Yes, there's talent around them, but we still think that they are above. They are head and shoulders, you could say, in some situations, above the other playmakers on their teams. CeeDee just kind of shook out as the 106, and there's an argument that he could, like we talked about with Jefferson, that CeeDee could be the wide receiver too. Cam believes it, so
yeah. And again, they're only 4 points apart in my projection, so that's 1 touchdown falls away from Jefferson or in CeeDee's favor. They flip spots in my projection, so they're knocking on the door of one another, and we have a lot more picks to cover here as well, fellas. But if you think the first round is all messed up as well, and you actually don't like our first round, you can go help influence that over on Underdog right now because they are hosting real drafts with real people for real money every second of the day. So we'll take a break here and hear from them. Today's podcast episode is brought to you by our friends over at Underdog Fantasy. Now, we love Underdog. It is the easiest place to play best ball formats, and they even have their own form of player props called Pick'em. You can make up to 20 times your money on a single night by correlating props together. 2 picks will triple your money, 3 will 6 times it, 4 will 10 times it, and 5 plays that all hit will multiply your entry by 20. You can even place insurance on your picks too, so if only 4 of your 5 props hit, you still get 10 times your entry. And if you use our code FELLAS when signing up, Underdog is going to double your first deposit up to $100. Alrighty, we are back. We've covered the first 6 picks of the first round. Bijan Robinson, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, and CeeDee Lamb. Cameron, you are on the clock with the 107 here. Who would your pick be?
Christian McCaffrey. And this is where I said before, hey, look, the running back 2. Why isn't he ahead of Gibbs? And Ty talked about it on the audio intro. We have to bake risk in a little bit to ADP, right? I hate the injury prone narrative. I've been very anti that as long as we've done this podcast. But with McCaffrey, we do just have to recognize there have been 3 seasons of the past 7 where they've just been completely thrown away because of injury. He's coming off of a thing that if it doesn't get better is, career crippling. So understanding that. But all reports say he should be healthy. All reports say he should not have lingering effects into this season. As long as we aren't hearing he's not practicing during training camp or something, I'm going to stay steady on this, that Christian McCaffrey should be at least running back 2, maybe running back 1. Because every year that he's healthy, all he does is score touchdowns and catch passes. And this season, I have him projected for his least amount of touches in a complete season since his second year in the league. I have him right now projected for his second least amount of for the least amount of touchdowns since his second year in the league. I have him projected for the worst yards per carry in any full season, and I still have him as the running back 2. I still am counting on regression coming in because the dude just scores touchdowns. You look at 2023, 21 total touchdowns, 2,000 total yards. It's just when he's on the field, they use him. He's unreal. And it's just you just can't bet against him as long as he's healthy. And I understand I can't draft him. He's burned me too many times. You're crazy for taking. I understand all that at this point, but I'm back in and I'm ready to be burned.
If every single running back in the NFL is healthy for an entire full season and you have to place your money on which one of them will finish at the running back 1 overall, who is it?
He's a pretty good bet.
It's Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
With the offense that he's in, the role that he plays, the way in which he scores fantasy points, you said it's a perfect way of saying it. When he's on the field, he's the walking RB1. Yeah. I mean, and now Saquon could maybe, say last year Saquon would probably have something to say about that, but in this offense with Brandon Ayuk coming off an ACL tear, you got Deebo Samuel out of town now. Not that Deebo was siphoning carries like crazy from Christian McCaffrey, but it's one less influence in the backfield. Christian McCaffrey's the team's best weapon.
Yeah.
Right? It's him and George Kittle, 1 and 2, and then pick your flavor of Ricky Pearsall, Juwan Jennings. So you better believe Kyle Shanahan, if Christian McCaffrey is good to go, is going to feed him until Christian McCaffrey begs to not be fed it anymore. And that's not going to happen because Christian McCaffrey is an absolute dog. Sprinkle on top, Ty, anything you want to add?
That 357.8 points in 2023. If you've been keeping track on YouTube, at least because you can see the graphics, it's the highest yearly total that we've seen from any player we've talked about so far. That is within the range of outcomes. I'm not saying that exact same stat line, but we're talking about a guy that can be the top overall guy in fantasy. And last time I checked, each of us like fantasy points. So
I do.
I mean, why would you not be in on Christian McCaffrey, at least at the price tag that he's going at right now in drafts?
I like guys who score an absurd amount of fantasy points. I mean, that you're never going to tell me to not be interested in those players, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to with Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
This is where I think go ahead, Cameron. You're going to chime in one more.
I was just going to say the last thing to add about that 2023 season. Deebo Samuel had 37 carries, 230 rushing yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns. There's a backup running back right there for you that's already going to be splitting, so I don't know. It's just the ceiling is just always absurd with Christian McCaffrey.
And that's why people still, I mean, over on Underdog, they're taking him as the 8th pick there right now. And that's exactly why his ADP has continued to climb all throughout the offseason. So I would expect this by the start of the season to be, you're knocking on the door of that Jahmyr Gibbs, CeeDee Lamb, range where it's like, actually, they're all sitting at an ADP of like 6 because nobody can make up their mind on which one they want. This is where I think we do kind of hit a tier break in the first round. And it sounds silly to call it a tier break because all these dudes are phenomenal. But to me, this is like my very comfortable top 7. And I think we start to open the door to other conversations here. So Ty, you do have the 108. You get to kind of start the run of this tier. Who's the pick?
Puka Nacua. And as you can see, Puka Nacua is the lowest projection so far of any player that we've talked about. And the reason why I've got Puka going ahead of some of the names that we're going to talk about in just a second is because I think moving off of Cooper Kupp means that Puka is going to be this offense. Yes, you have Kyron, and he's been a 300 touch merchant the past 2 years. Yes, you did bring in Devontae Adams, but Puka Nacua, right when he came back from his injury in week 8, wide receiver 4 in points per game. Like, Sean McVay put him right back into this offense, and he didn't skip a beat. Now you're coming in fully healthy, expecting that we're, obviously, like, our projections are for a full 17-game season. If he's injured for any duration, this pick can burn you. But at the same time, this is my vote of confidence in Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford and this Rams offense as a whole, that Puka Nacua can put up similar numbers to what we saw last year on a more consistent basis and can really push to being a top 3 guy in fantasy if things fall and break a certain way.
This Rams offense is just going to be so much fun this year. And I do have a player in mind who I'm going to reserve talking about for next week, but I think this passing attack could absolutely explode this year. I think the addition of Devontae Adams is so beneficial for Puka Nacua. I think if we're looking at Puka Nacua as an alpha, yeah, sure, he's still going at the 104 probably, but what Devontae Adams does now is just open the field so much more. And if we can get some touchdowns to fall Puka Nacua's way, if we can get him past 6 touchdowns, which I do think there's some positive regression, if you want to call it positive regression, which I don't know what you really want to call it when Puka hasn't put up more than 6 touchdowns in the season, but I think there's an opportunity he surpasses that this year. Man, then we're really in business. So there's really not a hole in Puka's game. Sean McVay is going to use him all over the field now that he has 2 guys that he can shift inside and out. Let's just get Puka some touchdowns this year, and it's entirely pants off. We're dancing from there.
Yeah, he's unreal when he's on the field. I talked about it earlier. Weeks 8 to 14. That was when both of them were healthy. Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, that is, last season and before the Rams just decided, hey, we don't throw to Cooper Kupp anymore for whatever reason. But during those 7 weeks, and mind you, in week 9, Puka played like 10% of snaps and got ejected for fighting. Puka was the wide receiver 2, and Cooper Kupp was a wide receiver 5 in half PPR. So this offense can exist where Puka is a top 4 player with another guy who's, Cooper Kupp during that time frame was averaging over 9 targets a game. They can coexist and the volume can be there and it can still work out. Puka only had 3 touchdowns in those 7 games, like you said, Lucas. Puka gets 6 touchdowns in those 7 games. He wouldn't be challenging Ja'Marr Chase because nobody would have been last year. But he was been firmly that wide receiver 2. So I don't want to hear it. I can't work with Devontae Adams or that narrative is not true. We know how good Puka is, and we know how much Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford trust him. So it's like I don't see the downside other than if you want to say injuries, and I'm not going to bank on him getting injured for a 3rd year in a row.
Let's keep it clicking along here. This is where I'm really curious to get both of your thoughts. I know where Ty lies on this one. I think, Cameron, I'm really more interested to get your thoughts, and I'm curious to hear what the public thinks of this as well. So if you're still listening at this point, let me know what you think of Devon Achane at the 9th overall pick in your fantasy football drafts. I do have him projected for 283 points. I do have him as my running back 5 after the likes of Bijan, Gibbs, Saquon, and Christian McCaffrey. I tweeted this out a couple weeks ago at this point. Last year, in 11 healthy games with Tua Tagovailoa. Devon Achane, a 17.5% target share. That was the running back 2. 19.5 fantasy points per game was good for the running back 3. He was on pace for 20.3 expected fantasy points per game. That would be the running back 1 overall. The reason for that is the Miami Dolphins offensive line, not great last year. All right. So that's why we saw a lot of Jonnu Smith getting targeted behind the line of scrimmage. That's why you got a lot of quick passes to Devon Achane. Now, the Dolphins offensive line should improve this year, but at the same time, who says they're not going to continue to just pepper Devon Achane with targets with no more Jonnu Smith? Look, you can have your opinion on Darren Waller. I kind of don't care what your opinion is on Darren Waller. I just don't think Darren Waller is going to entirely fill in the void of targets that Jonnu Smith is leaving behind from last year. So the receiving season that Devon Achane had last year, can we get the perfect storm of super high efficiency from his rookie season and super high receiving game usage like we saw last year? If we do, we're talking about a guy who's easily in the same tier as a Jahmyr Gibbs, as a Saquon Barkley, right? We're talking about a guy who could put up 340 fantasy points this year. So for me, if I want to win my fantasy football leagues, I want to draft Devon Achane at this point.
You said it earlier that we had hit a tier break. We had not hit a tier break because Devon Achane is in that upper tier. He's my running back 3 right now.
Okay, he is in that tier for you. Okay.
And
I don't hate that. I don't hate that.
If we're talking a guy who could be 2022 Austin Eckler, who could flirt with 100 receptions, I think it could be Devon Achane. He's a guy, I think with the amount of receiving work, you don't really want him getting more than 200 rush attempts. You want that coming through the receiving game because you want, as a smaller running back, that body to be preserved. He had 12 touchdowns last year. And like you said, that Miami offense without Tua was abysmal. He had 11 touchdowns in 2023 and played like 6 games, right? So, I mean, the dude is just going to continue to put up fantasy points. If you want anyone who is going to challenge what we're going to see from CMC, this is your guy. I think him, Gibbs, and CMC just have that. We could see ridiculous amount of targets. You want us in space constantly. I mean, Bijan's a different type of running back, so that's why I'm not including him in that. I think Bijan's still great. Yeah, I don't know. I have him stat out for 106 targets, and even with Darren Waller is a rapper. He's not a football player, so I'm not too worried about him stealing too many targets from
music career couldn't get going. So he gave the Dolphins a call and said, "I'll do anything."
Yeah.
Trade a fax machine for me. We'll make it happen. So I mean, Ty, I know you're bullish on Devon Achane too. I'm curious why you still want Puka ahead of him, and maybe we don't need to hash out Puka again, but like I find it interesting that your selection was Puka and not Devon Achane.
Because it does come back to draft theory and looking at a second round ADP for Devon Achane right now. I think Puka Nacua is going at pick 7, pick 8 in the first round. So there was the hope, and we talked about it on the mock draft live stream again, not to plug that, but shameless plug.
We're doing them often enough.
I'm just saying. 108, 109 is where I'm starting to think about Achane at this point. And I really have zero regrets about it because I want to hear the downside, or I want to hear the pessimistic case for Devon Achane. Not saying that he's the perfect pick or that he's the perfect right. Well, McCaffrey has glass knees, and look what he can do.
Yeah.
So I'm all in on Achane, especially at the ADP. And even if he climbs into the end of the first round, I'm still going to be in on him because I'm very much in love with Achane this year.
Well, and sorry, I shouldn't say glass knees. It's really like paper thin ankles, paper thin hamstrings. I mean, that's really.
I mean, have you seen really Justin Jefferson's ankles before? Dog.
I mean, we don't need to body shame these players. It was more so Achane. But we're not doing that.
Have you seen Nick Chubb's knees?
Yeah. Okay. Why he's backup for Joe Mixon now. Anyways, let's before we derail ourselves any further, Cam 110. Just an interesting. This is an interesting tier now at this point, and of course, you get to talk about probably your favorite player, and maybe I won't say in fantasy football, but the player you have been
close.
He's the player you have definitely been the most bullish on since he entered the league.
Yeah, it's Brian Thomas. Some of you might be surprised that we haven't talked about him yet. He's my wide receiver 4. I have him right after the big 3. I will say it is a very tight tier from wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 10. So, we'll talk about a player later. I will say he's, my wide receiver 8. He's pretty close to Brian Thomas in this tier. However, last season, 3rd in receiving yards, 5th in receiving touchdowns on what was described as a really bad offense that had Mac Jones playing for half of it. Now we get what we think is an upgrade at play caller. We're going to get a full season of Trevor Lawrence. We're going to get a reliable, well, I shouldn't say reliable. Actually, I take that back. A talented wide receiver on the other side of him and Travis Hunter. I won't say reliable. I don't know why.
We haven't seen it yet.
It was
talented
wrong.
Talented is the right word.
But yeah, he's a down the field threat. He's a cross the field threat. He's an in open space threat. He does it all. People were worried, he's a little more raw than, like Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze and Marvin Harrison. He came out and he looked like he belonged from day one, right? I mean, there's never been a question. He's supremely talented. I'm so excited to see what he does in a year 2 step. We talk about, him and Neighbors, who admittedly a little bit lower on. We talked about him in our last episode.
Mm-hmm.
But you want to talk about 2 guys that could easily join that top 3 tier this season? Those are probably the 2 guys who are primed to take that next step and jump in there because of what they did as rookies. Like, it's crazy because him, Neighbors, Jace Jefferson and Chase have screwed up our perception of rookies, where we look at guys like Marvin Harrison. We're like, he is a total bust. And it's like, no, Marvin Harrison did that 6 years ago. You're like, hey, that's pretty good for a rookie. And now it's like, you didn't have 1,200 yards and 10 touchdowns? That's awful, because that's just the standard that these guys are setting.
Ty, how bullish are you on Brian Thomas this year? Where does he fall in your rankings?
Well, let's see. He is my wide receiver.
It's a bad way to ask that question, because I basically just set you up for failure if he's not also your wide receiver 4 or 5. So, Ty, where does Brian Thomas Jr. fall in your rankings this year?
He's my wide receiver 5.
Yeah, he is.
Oh, baby. Okay. All right. So I asked the question appropriately.
You did. Just for context, Brian Thomas Jr., from weeks 13 to 18 after their bye week, he was the wide receiver 3 in points per game. On the year, he was the wide receiver 12 in points per game. So I am seeing Brian Thomas Jr. as my wide receiver 5, as him taking a step forward because of Liam Cohen kind of organizing this offense a bit. It's not necessarily that, like, I believe that he has been a top 5 wide receiver, even though, again, the stretch that he went on at the end of the year was nutso. I think, again, the step forward going into year 2, again, Liam Cohen with this offense, I think it can propel him into being a more consistent top 5 wide receiver.
Well, and I'll mention that stretch at the end of last year that you brought up. Mac Jones as his quarterback. The old reliable Mac Jones as his quarterback. So, I mean, everything is an upgrade here for Brian Thomas Jr. Like you both, the wide receiver, well, for Cam, you're the wide receiver 4, Ty, you're the wide receiver 5. He's the wide receiver 5 in my projections as well. So if you want to see how other wide receivers stack up against Brian Thomas Jr., a few other guys we haven't mentioned, because Brian Thomas right now, he's not going in the first round over on Underdog. But for us, he's very clearly a first-round pick. If you want to see how he compares to other guys as well, the other projections we have on literally 292 players, check out our 2025 draft guide. You can get that down in the description or pinned comment. Or if you just want the link here, fellasdraftguide.com. It's all yours. Full statted out projections, consensus rankings, individual team pages highlighting coaching staff, different schemes, key additions, subtractions. So many different things we've added for you this year. fellasdraftguide.com or down in the description or link in the pinned comment. Ty, 111. Make your pick.
That had a very standoffish tone to it.
So I admittedly tried to keep this a little bit more open-ended, of like, we know who everyone's picking at this point. We had to do some pre-work prep on this episode, but I didn't want to just like give it away for people. So I just had the ominous tone and just said, make your pick.
Ominous, and the pessimism was seeping through on that one. I caught that one. It's Derrick Henry. Old man Derrick Henry has cracked the top or
Get this man a cane.
Very similar case to Saquon Barkley. Last year was an insanely efficient year going from Tennessee to Baltimore. And again, I'm banking on system, talent, everything that comes with the Baltimore run game. That's essentially what I'm betting on, is the Baltimore run game. And I think, again, the reason why people are kind of keeping him out of the first round is, like I said, for efficiency, and that there may be a step back in that. He is another year older. So again, and this has been the case for at least the past 3 years, is that people have tried to predict the downfall of Derrick Henry, the year where the wheels start to kind of fall off. Could it be this year? Yes. But guess what? We've been saying that for the past 3 years, and Derrick Henry has been absolute dynamite. So again, I'm going to bet on Baltimore's offense being one of the top units in the league. I know I hate to keep going back to the efficiency point, but again, talent, line, scheme, team, I'm going to bet on it all with Baltimore.
Which, when you boil it down to that simple of an equation, like, it's not a bad bet to make. My thing is, you really think Derrick Henry is going to average 6 yards per carry again at 5.9 last year? All respect to the man. I'm not trying to predict the downfall of Derrick Henry. That's not what I'm doing when I say this. I got him coming down to 5 yards carry this year. I got it for 305 attempts. Right? It's like the gasp of like, what do you mean? But like, that number was like, we thought Saquon Barkley's 5.6 yards per carry was stupid absurd. I mean, Derrick Henry is averaging nearly half a yard more. That is stupid absurd to me. So I just have to believe that comes down even to 5 yards per carry this year. That is still a phenomenal number. I also think the Ravens offense is just bound for a little bit of regression as a whole after the phenomenal season they put up last year as well. Again, they're still going to be a solidified top 7 unit in the league, but how they fall, how proficient they are, how efficient, to be determined. I'm betting on that coming backwards a little bit. And I just don't think Derrick Henry has the same efficiency as I only have him for 20 less carries. I just don't think we see the same efficiency. That's about it. I still have him 13 and a half rushing touchdowns, I believe, as well. So that's what it is for me. Yeah, that's it. Right. As he only had 12 and 13 in 2023 and 2022. You stop that, right?
But no, 16 last year. 16.
Yeah, I know. Only 13 and a half, Lucas. Gosh, you're actually, it's only 13. I lied. I added an extra half on there to make you feel a little bit better, Ty. I actually have him for 13. But Cam, where's he at for you? Where do you land on the Derrick Henry per spectrum here?
Yeah, it's just efficiency. I don't think volume's going to come down a ton. I still have him over 300 touches. I still think he's had 957 carries over the last 3 years. That's 70 more than Saquon, who's second. That's almost 100 more than Josh Jacobs, who's third. It's almost 200 more than the guy in fourth place. So it's just the amount of carries he's taking on at 31 years old. It's just, at some point, you got to imagine that it comes down. And I still have him as a top 16 guy. It's not like I think the wheels fall off. I just don't believe that we're going to see the same, like Lucas was saying, same efficiency. And it is if for whatever reason he averages 4.7 yards per carry this year, he just doesn't have the receiving work to keep it where it's like, okay, he can kind of make up for it in other ways. If he has 18 touchdowns again, then who cares about the efficiency? He's going to be a top 3 guy. That's also kind of the bet I'm taking on it. And I understand, Ty. I understand why you're laughing, because at the end of the year, we'll probably look back at it and we'll go,
gosh darn it, we did it again.
We did it again. And you know what? I'm okay with that, because I'm not out on Derrick Henry. I just think that this is just a little higher than I would go.
Well, so that's where that's a good way to describe how I feel. I am not out on Derrick Henry. I'm not saying this is the year where he finishes as the running back 15 instead of the running back 5. I got him at running back 7. It's one spot positionally after where he goes right now. I personally don't buy into him as a first round pick, but Ty, you're willing to push him up there, which, hey, like, that's fine. That, like, you are entitled to your opinion in that regard. And go ahead, you can explain why you're giggling, but I just want to make sure, like, Cam and I aren't out here trying to like bow, like tell you how wrong you are. It's just a counterpoint, and you're entitled to have your own opinion here, and remind people how dominant Derrick Henry can be in an offense that's substantially better than the Tennessee Titans.
Well, first of all, you guys are pretty ageist. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay?
Very ageist.
Hey, one of us is willing to admit
Mostert. I don't even want to hear his name again. Like, that's how ageist I am.
But I hear it for you guys and the efficiency and the touchdowns coming back down. Look at 2022 on Tennessee. He had nearly 1.5 yards per carry less than he did last year with 4.4. He had 13 total touchdowns that year. He finished with 18.9 fantasy points per game. And based on last year, 18.9 fantasy points per game, running back 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the counter punch you throw. Absolutely. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that regression can also mean top 5 running back. It just ends up being less than the 5 guys we've already talked about, and one more who we're going to talk about as well. That's all it is for me. Derrick Henry is very much in this range still. He's just your flavor compared to Cameron and I, who aren't quite there.
I like touchdowns. I like touchdowns.
Touchdowns are a good thing to chase in fantasy football, especially when they come at from a guy like Derrick Henry. 112. I'll wrap out the first round here, and then we'll do a quick breeze through the first 3 picks of the second round to give you a nice, clean and neat top 15. Nico Collins here at the 112 for me. You could easily say this will be the player Cameron will end up talking about at the 201. Because after I made this pick, I'm like, I could go either way on this one. I don't really have a strong lean whatsoever. For me, it's Nico Collins in a bounce back year from CJ Stroud. We saw how dominant Nico was at the start of the year, putting up top 5 wide receiver numbers. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll are nice players. There's been a lot of Jaden Higgins buzz out of camp recently. I completely understand that, but Nico's the alpha last I checked. That's kind of all I need to say here in a bounce back season. So Nico Collins to me is a first round pick. If you take him at 12 or 13, that's totally fine. I personally don't have a problem with him going earlier. I don't have a problem with him going later. This is just my flavor and what I think that the Texans will be as an offense this year.
Yeah, I mean, I love Nico. He's right there for me. He's my, let's see, wide receiver. What? I don't want to butcher this by trying to count. He's my wide receiver 7. I have one wide receiver ahead of him that I would have taken here, who we're actually not going to talk about today. And then it's Mr. Drake London. I'll just throw that out there.
Someone's bullish on Drake London.
And then the guy I'm going to talk about. That's a
conversation for another time.
The guy I'm going to talk about next, I would have taken here as well. But Nico, like you said, he's a guy who, unfortunately, we just haven't seen it for a whole season. And if he's healthy, what we've seen in the stretches with CJ Stroud makes you go, this is a guy who get 1,500 yards, 10 touchdowns, 100 receptions, and I could be extremely happy with. So, yeah, I don't see myself betting against Nico. He's a big play guy who also gets a ton of volume and also scores touchdowns. So it's like, I don't know what there's not to like. Texans offense, CJ Stroud, probably not going to be worse than what they were last year. Got to imagine, if anything, we see a little bit of a, step back in the right direction. So I like Nico a lot. I'm not much more I'm going to add.
Ty, where does Nico fall for you in your projections?
Wide receiver 6. Quite literally 1 point less than what you have him projected for. So I am right there with you with Nico. The question is going to be injuries, because he's dealt with them in back-to-back years.
Yep.
But when he's healthy, the dude is absolute dynamite.
So Nico Collins last year, first 5 games of the season, and I'm including that week 5 game when he actually left early because of a hamstring injury. And he still managed to put up literally, I think it was on like 2 targets. He put up like a 60-yard touchdown. He went 2 for 2, 78 and a score. Still ended up scoring 14.8 points that game. Nico Collins was the wide receiver 2 to start last year. I mean, he is so explosive. He is so talented. And again, I'm just going to bet on the bounce back here with him as an alpha. Simple as that. I think he's the most explosive. No, I'm not going to say that. There might be one more explosive wide receiver we're going to talk about, but man, Nico is worthy of being in that elite wide receiver conversation in the NFL. I love him here at 112 or the 201 as well. Which Cameron, we'll start to wrap it out here. 201, make your pick.
Yeah, it's Ashton Genty. I won't spend a ton of time just because we did talk about him on Tuesday's episode. I think he's going to see a ton of volume. I'm not as bullish on his passing volume as Lucas is, but I do think he's going to see a ton of volume. I think because of that, he's going to score touchdowns. I think Geno propels this offense forward quite a bit, which I think some people just aren't taking into account how much of an upgrade Geno actually is going to be over what they saw last year. I think Pete Carroll wants to run the ball. I know Chip Kelly wants to throw the ball, but I think they're going to have a healthy mix of that. And I'm calculating in for Genty a significant workload over Raheem Mostert, who would be his backup in this offense. I mean, you invest that much capital, you're going to give it to him. Your name's not Arthur Smith, so you're not going to screw us over. Like, it's just, I'm betting on Ashton Genty for sure. I love the talent, and I think the situation is good enough. The offensive line sucks, but I think the situation's good enough.
Talent's going to win. Talent's going to win out here with Ashton Genty. Again, he's the guy where it's like, man, you know what? Maybe I actually should have taken here with Nico, but really, if you're sitting at the 1-2 turn and Ashton Genty is still here, you take him and, your flavor of wide receivers here that we'll talk about to close out, or Nico Collins. 100%. I think Ashton Genty is worthy of either being the 112 or the 201 here. Ty, I'll come to you, 202. This might be the most surprising name thus far that we haven't covered.
Malik Neighbors. A guy that is going at pick 9 in drafts right now, at least on Underdog. And I think the reason why we have Neighbors going this late is because we're kind of expecting the same as what we got last year, where you will look at the stat boxes or the stat lines, and you'll go, holy cow, Malik Neighbors. It is really just the offense that he's in, and we're still kind of hesitant and not so in on Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart being, the guys, being the savior of the quarterback position for the Giants. So even if he does put up a similar stat line to what he did last year, that can only get you so far. The guy was wide receiver 8 in points per game. So it's not that we don't think the Neighbors is a bad pick, but we just struggle to see what the upside is, especially if we're going at pick 9 in the first round, like inside the top 10 picks. So I think there's an argument that he could go starting at like the 111 if you do kind of believe in Russell Wilson, Jackson Dart. But I think for us, we would much rather go like 201, 202 of Malik Neighbors.
Just look at the offenses of the guys who are going ahead of him and the wide receivers. Like, again, I don't want to spend too much time on Malik Neighbors because I talked about him ad nauseum on Tuesday, excuse me. I just believe in all these offenses substantially more than I do the New York Giants. Yeah. It's not that I like talent's going to win out here. Malik Neighbors is an extremely talented wide receiver, but gosh darn it, so is every other wide receiver we've talked about ahead of him. Yeah. Like at some point, something has to give. Malik Neighbors can be extremely talented. We can pencil him in as, a top 7 wide receiver in the NFL. All these other guys we've talked about are right there on the doormat with him. So wide receiver 7 came up for you, Ty. Came out even lower for me. By the time I do some tweaking, he'll probably end up coming back up a little bit. But yeah, I'm gonna have a tough time stomaching Malik Neighbors. At his current price tag, where he's going mid-late first round. 110, like you said, is about the earliest I'm probably considering him, and I still have how many wide receivers ranked ahead of him. I'll close this out here. The people might be upset with this one because this is a pick in Amon-Ra St. Brown that will never lose you your league. And that has to mean something, right? I think for some people it means more than others where, well, I still have questions about the Jaguars offense. Yeah, you're right. We haven't seen it. There's a lot of newness there. Could take some time to mold itself. Well, yeah, Nico Collins, sure, but like, is CJ Stroud's shoulder fully healthy? Yeah, totally. I get that. Amon-Ra is like the one constant you could take anywhere in the first round, and you're like, yeah, I'm not coming in last. pick. But again, just how my projection shook out, where Amon-Ra ends up being behind some of these, I think, higher, more explosive wide receivers in their offenses. I got no problem if you want to take Amon-Ra at the end of the first round, just where he fell in my projections. And I try to stay as true to my projections as much as possible. But fellas, I mean, you got to agree with the people to some extent that Amon-Ra isn't going to be a guy who loses you your league, barring any injury this year, right?
No, I don't think taking him at ADP is even a bad pick. It's just I'm as
No.
low as you are. I actually think I'm lower. I think I have him. He might even be outside my top. He might be at wide receiver 10. He is at wide receiver 10 for me. And
Okay.
it comes down to the fact, I mean, if he has Drake London season from last year, one second, I just had it and then I clicked it out. Drake London had 100 receptions, 1,271 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He'd be the wide receiver 13 in points per game. And in a season where I expect, a small regression, like we've continually talked about, if he instead of 12 touchdowns has 8 touchdowns, if he doesn't have an 80% catch rate, has a 70% catch rate, he's at that mark, right? And so that's just the things I'm keeping in mind. That's why he's a little bit lower, but there does feel like his floor. It does feel like I have him wide receiver 10 is his floor, which it's a safe pick in the first round.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, anything you want to add in on top of that?
I just think it's eerily similar. His 2024 year, or stat line, I should say, to his 2022. Difference is just 6 touchdowns. And even if that stat line is 9 touchdowns, it's not necessarily the same as to what you were kind of expecting with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So there's an argument that he could have gone ahead of Neighbors, could have gone ahead of Genty, in my opinion. Like there's that argument because again, there is something to be said about the safety of Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah, I have him set it up for 9 touchdowns this year. And that's kind of what it comes down to, right? I don't think he's going to be a 12 touchdown guy. He's going to be a volume guy. He's absolutely going to catch passes. He's absolutely going to pass, be hovering right around the 1,200 yard mark. But when you lose 18 fantasy points on touchdowns, it's tough to make those up in other areas, unless if you're uber efficient, which Amon-Ra relies much more on the passing game and his reception totals to help make up for that. We'll put a pin in everything there. Again, if you want to draft all these players right now, if you want to help influence where they're being drafted in the first round, Underdog is a place you want to be to go do that. Use code FELLAS when you sign up. They'll give you a deposit bonus up to $1,000 and a free pick for their Pick'em lobby as well. You can get our draft guide as well if you want to start planning for your drafts. FellasDraftGuide.com. Link in the description, link in the pinned comment as well. We're releasing a new edition of that every 2 weeks. So it's not like it's just a one and done. Here you go, cheat sheet. We're done statting in July. No, we'll send you updates all throughout the offseason as well. You can follow our other socials, FFFellas on Twitter, the FFLs on Instagram, Fantasy Football Fellas on Facebook and TikTok. If you want to stay here on YouTube and you're watching there, I completely get it. Fantasy Football Fellas shorts over there. You can follow our personal socials too. One more plug. Just one more before we sign off. I'm at Lucas Wenzel on X, Camlaw FFF for Cameron, Tyler_Plath for Ty. Next week, fun episodes coming up. What do we got? What can I preview next week? I don't have the sheet up in front of me. We got mock draft on Monday. If you want to come join us for a fun little mock draft action, we will be live where you can join a mock draft with us. Ty and I had a lot of fun on last week's mock draft. That was a fun one, getting to interact with you all. We got, golly, Lucas, just keep it up in front of you. Oh yeah, this will be really fun. We're gonna be talking exposures next week. Players we have not and will not draft in fantasy football this year, along with some mid-round targets for you as well. I'm gonna shut up now because at this point you've totally clicked off the episode. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week. Deuces.